5 types of people God chooses. Which one are you? There is a quiet moment that comes to many believers, often late at night or in the middle of an ordinary day, when a thought settles into the heart and refuses to leave. Does my life actually matter in God's plan? Not in a dramatic, world-changing way, but right here in the life you're living with the story you've been given. You may look around and see others who seem more confident, more gifted, more spiritually impressive, and wonder why God would ever choose someone like you for anything meaningful. Scripture tells a very different story than the one we often tell ourselves. Again and again, God bypasses the obvious choices. He does not build his kingdom on human strength, flawless character, or perfect timing. He chooses people with scars, people with questions, people who don't fully understand why they've walked through what they've walked through. He chooses people who feel unqualified, unseen, and sometimes even unworthy, and he does it on purpose. You see, God's way of choosing has never aligned with human logic. When the world looks for power, God looks for surrender. When the world celebrates visibility, God watches the heart in secret. When the world says you are behind, forgotten, or not enough, God may be saying, "This is exactly where I begin." If you've ever felt out of place, misunderstood, or delayed in life, if you've wondered why your path seems harder, quieter, or slower than others, this message is for you. Not to flatter you, not to label you as special in a shallow way, but to help you see something deeper, that God's choices are intentional, personal, and often hidden until the right moment. The Bible reveals patterns, types of people God consistently chooses to work through. Not because they are perfect, but because they are positioned. Not because they are fearless, but because they are willing. As we walk through these types together, don't rush to fit yourself neatly into one category. Listen with an open heart. Pay attention to what stirs, what convicts, what comforts you. Because the question isn't whether God still chooses people today. The real question is whether you're willing to recognize his hand in your own life. Number 1, God chooses the broken, not the perfect. One of the greatest lies many believers carry is the idea that God waits for you to be fixed before he can use you. That lie quietly convinces people to stay on the sidelines thinking, once I heal, once I get stronger, once I stop struggling, then God can work through me. But the Bible tells a completely different story. God does not begin with perfection. He begins with brokenness. Throughout Scripture, the people God chose most powerfully were often the most fractured on the inside. They carried guilt, fear, regret, and wounds that never fully disappeared. And yet, those very cracks became the places where God's power shone through most clearly. Brokenness does something success never can. It humbles you. It strips away self-reliance. It teaches you how desperately you need God. Not just on your worst days, but every single day. If you've been through failure that still haunts you, pain that reshaped your personality, or loss that changed the way you see the world, you may feel disqualified. You may look at your past and think, God wouldn't choose someone like me. But in God's kingdom, brokenness is not a stain. It is often a sign. It means your heart has been softened. It means you know what weakness feels like. It means you are less likely to rely on yourself and more likely to lean on him. God chooses the broken because they understand grace. They don't preach from theory. They speak from experience. They don't judge easily because they remember what it feels like to fall. They don't boast because they know how fragile they are. And when God restores a broken person, there is no confusion about where the power came from. It is clear to everyone watching that this was not human strength. It was divine mercy. If you feel shattered, worn down, or spiritually exhausted, don't assume God has stepped away from you. He may actually be closer than ever. Sometimes God allows the breaking not to destroy you, but to remove what would have eventually destroyed you anyway. Pride, self-sufficiency, false confidence. What feels like the end may be the beginning of being shaped into someone God can trust. Being broken does not mean you are unusable. It means you are moldable. And in God's hands, a broken life surrendered to Him can become a vessel far more powerful than a life that never learned how to kneel. Number 2. God chooses the willing, not the qualified. One of the most common reasons people hesitate to step into what God is calling them to do is the belief that they are not qualified enough. They look at their lack of knowledge, their limited experience, their fear of speaking, leading, or failing, and they assume God must be looking for someone more capable. But Scripture consistently shows that God has never depended on human qualifications to accomplish divine purposes. God is not searching for the most impressive resume. He is listening for a willing heart. Willingness is the quiet decision to say yes, even when you feel unsure, afraid, or unprepared. It is choosing obedience over confidence, trust over control. The people God chooses are often the ones who say, "I don't know how this will work, but I'm willing to follow." When God calls someone, He already knows their limitations. Nothing about your weakness surprises Him. Your fear does not disqualify you. Your lack of skill does not make Him reconsider. In fact, your inability often becomes the very reason His strength can be revealed. When the outcome cannot be explained by talent or experience, God receives the glory, and faith is strengthened, not just in you, but in everyone watching. If you are waiting to feel ready before you obey, you may wait forever. Readiness is rarely something God gives before obedience. It usually comes through obedience. Each small step of faith builds the courage for the next one. Each moment you choose to trust God despite uncertainty deepens your dependence on Him. God does not ask for perfection. He asks for availability. Willing people are teachable. They listen when God corrects them. They adjust when He redirects them. They don't cling to pride or insist on understanding everything before moving forward. They simply keep walking, even when the path feels unclear, and that kind of posture invites God's guidance in powerful ways. If you feel unqualified today, take that as an invitation rather than a rejection. God may be drawing you into a place where you must rely on Him completely. He does not call the confident, because confidence can replace faith. He calls the willing, those who are ready to say yes even when their hands are shaking. Number 3. God chooses the overlooked and forgotten. There are seasons in life when it feels like you are standing in the background while everyone else is being noticed. You do the right thing quietly. You show up consistently. You remain faithful when it would be easier to give up. And yet no one seems to see it. No recognition, no affirmation, no visible reward. In those moments, it is easy to assume that being overlooked means being unimportant. But in God's kingdom, the opposite is often true. God has always had a habit of choosing people the world barely notices. Those pushed to the margins, those underestimated, those passed over because they didn't fit the expected image of strength or leadership. While others compete for attention, God watches the ones who remain faithful without an audience. He sees the quiet obedience, the unseen sacrifices, the prayers whispered when no one is listening. Being overlooked by people does not mean you are overlooked by God. In fact, some of God's greatest preparation happens in obscurity. Hidden seasons are not wasted seasons. They are where character is formed, motives are purified, and dependence on God is deepened. When there is no applause, the heart learns who it is truly serving. If you feel forgotten, consider this. God often hides those He plans to use, not to punish them, but to protect them. Visibility too early can damage what hasn't yet been strengthened. Obscurity allows you to grow roots before bearing fruit. It teaches you to value God's approval over human praise. The overlooked are often the most dangerous to the enemy, because they learn how to listen to God rather than the noise of the crowd. They develop patience. They gain wisdom. They learn to trust God's timing instead of forcing doors open themselves. And when God finally lifts them into a place of influence, they don't lose themselves, because their identity was formed when no one was watching. If you feel invisible today, don't rush your season. God sees you. He knows exactly where you are. And when the time is right, He has a way of bringing forward the very people others forgot, so that His purpose, not human recognition, gets the glory. Number 4. God chooses those who endure quietly. There is a kind of strength that rarely gets celebrated. The strength to keep going when nothing changes, to keep believing when prayers seem unanswered, to remain faithful when the season feels long, heavy, and unfair. This is the endurance God notices most, and it is one of the clearest signs of someone He chooses. Enduring quietly means carrying weight without bitterness. It means resisting the urge to give up, lash out, demand immediate results. Many people can start with passion, but few can stay consistent when enthusiasm fades and the road becomes lonely. God chooses those who remain steady, not because they are unaffected by pain, but because they refuse to let pain define them. Some of the deepest spiritual work God does happens in silence. No dramatic breakthroughs, no visible progress. Just daily obedience, waking up, trusting again, praying again, believing again. These moments shape a faith that cannot be shaken by circumstances, because it has already survived disappointment. Endurance produces a kind of spiritual maturity that shortcuts can never create. If you are tired, worn down, or wondering how much longer you can keep going, God sees that struggle. Quiet endurance is not weakness, it is strength under control. It shows God that you trust Him even when the timeline doesn't make sense. It proves that your faith is not based on outcomes but on relationship. Those who endure quietly learn something powerful. God is present even when He feels silent. They discover that waiting does not mean abandonment. They learn how to lean on God rather than rushing ahead of Him. And over time, endurance reshapes the soul. It produces humility, patience, and resilience that cannot be taught any other way. If you are in a season where you feel unseen, unheard, and stretched beyond comfort, don't underestimate what God is doing. He often entrusts greater responsibility to those who have proven they can endure without losing their faith. Quiet endurance is not a pause in your calling. It is part of how God prepares you to carry it. Number 5. God chooses those who are willing to be transformed. One of the clearest signs that God is at work in someone's life is not how spiritual they appear, but how willing they are to change. God does not choose people who cling tightly to who they used to be. He chooses those who are willing to be reshaped, even when that process is uncomfortable, humbling, and slow. Transformation requires surrender. It means allowing God to confront attitudes, habits, and patterns that feel familiar but no longer align with His purpose. Many people want God's blessings without God's refining, but God's calling always comes with transformation. He does not simply improve who you are. He renews you from the inside out. Those willing to be transformed don't defend their old identity. They don't excuse their flaws or resist correction. They listen when God convicts them, even when it hurts. They choose growth over comfort. This kind of heart posture tells God that He can trust you with more, because you won't idolize the version of yourself that He is trying to change. Transformation is rarely instant. It happens layer by layer, often through circumstances you didn't choose. God uses challenges, delays, and even failures to strip away what no longer serves His purpose. Each change, though painful at times, creates more space for God's presence to dwell within you. If you sense God stirring something new in your life, but you feel uneasy or resistant, that tension may be the very place transformation is happening. God is not asking you to become someone else overnight. He is inviting you to become who He originally designed you to be, free from fear, pride, and limitation. God chooses those who are willing to be transformed because they understand that calling is not about status but about alignment. When you allow God to change you, you don't lose yourself. You finally discover the version of you that was meant to walk in His purpose all along. Conclusion. As you look back over these 5 types of people God chooses, one truth becomes clear. God's calling is far more personal than we often realize. He is not scanning the earth for flawless believers or impressive spiritual performances. He is looking for hearts that are open, honest, and surrendered. Brokenness, willingness, obscurity, endurance, and transformation are not random traits. They are patterns God repeatedly uses to shape those He trusts with His purposes. You may recognize yourself in more than one of these descriptions. You may feel broken and overlooked at the same time. You may be enduring quietly while God is slowly transforming you. That is not confusion. It is growth. God's work in a life is rarely neat or linear. It unfolds over time, often in ways that only make sense when you look back. If you've been doubting whether God could truly choose you, let this settle in your spirit. God already knows your weaknesses, your past, and your fears, and He is not waiting for them to disappear before He works through you. He is shaping you right now in the season you're in, using experiences you may not have chosen but that He has not wasted. The question is not which type you are. The deeper question is whether you're willing to trust God's hand in your life, even when the process feels uncomfortable or unclear. God's calling does not always come with clarity, but it always comes with purpose. If your heart is still listening, still seeking, still willing to follow, then you are not behind, forgotten, or disqualified. You are exactly where God can work with you. And sometimes being chosen by God doesn't look like standing out to the world. It looks like quietly becoming who God has been shaping you to be all along.